Good. Thank you, everyone, for joining this session. I hope you are having a wonderful time with at the Ashoka Changemakers Summit. There's a lot of feedback that we are getting from participants, how the sessions have been. And it's really, really amazing to have an opportunity to connect with this broader, network of change leaders drawn from different sectors. Thank you so much also for joining this particular session on looking at the collaboration between international NGOs and social entrepreneurs, kind of just thinking of this international alliance. With me are really renowned, I would say, experts in this field, and of course also social entrepreneurs. By the time we are done with this, you will know who is a radical in terms of just the topic and understanding or the thinking of how this should be, how it should look like, and also you'll get to know who is the activist in this panel. And of course, we have two social entrepreneurs who are Ashoka Fellows from East Africa, Kenya, and Rwanda, to be specific. Just to get us started, we're still waiting for Pap Sam, the executive director, Ashoka Africa, who's going to give us just opening remarks. I would want to introduce my panelists, starting with Benjamin. So, Benjamin is the head of innovation at the UK Commonwealth and Development Office, formerly DFID, right? Um, and I will just mention it now. Benjamin is the one who identifies himself more as an activist. So we will want to hear from his perspective, from an activist sort of perspective, and a bit of also from the role that he's currently playing. What does this topic really mean for you? Next is David Zingler, Head of Institutional Partnership Development at SOS Children Village International. David is also quite invested in understanding issues, the nexus of collaboration between international traditional players and social entrepreneurs. Has been involved in a number of research on this topic. So quite a bit of knowledge coming through there as well. We are expecting Felicity, also who's an Ashoka Fellow and founder of Association of Kigali Women in Sports, a fellow in Rwanda. We're still hoping she will be joining shortly. Last but not in any way least is Megan. Megan, also an Ashoka Fellow and founder and CEO of Zana Africa, a social enterprise based in Kenya, and focusing on issues of access to sanitary pads and broader health education in East Africa. But of course, I know, Megan, you'll have an opportunity to just tell us more about the work that you do. So thank you very much. In this session also, we have Brian Chesoli. Brian, would you kindly just introduce yourself, the coordinator for this particular session?
Thank you, Vincent. My name is Brian Chesoli. I'm part of Ashoka East Africa team. I'm leading the Making More Health program, and I'll be helping the panelists just coordinate this session. So feel free to chat with us, and I'm going to just share the same with our speakers today. Thank you, Vincent.
Thank you, Brian. Just before we get started, the big question is, why is this topic relevant? Why is it crucial now? Why is it important for us to be discussing this? Before we get there, before we get started, and I will be asking Benjamin to just give us your first thought. By introduction, my name is Vincent Otieno Odiambo. I work with Ashoka. I lead Ashoka in East Africa, leading an amazing team here in putting together, building this network of leading social entrepreneurs, collaborative network, just to add, and also reaching out to many more transformative change leaders and change institutions that are aligned with Ashoka's vision of everyone a change maker world. I am excited to be moderating this session, to be facilitating this conversation. And I'm very sure that at the end of it, there will be a lot that we'll have learned from this conversation, and also some key action points that we will together have to push and get some kind of argument around. It is also a topic that I find, really relevant. One, because of the conversation that I've been part of with a number of my colleagues from Europe and even from the US. on the need to rethink development, the need to rethink our collaboration, our traditional sort of partners, people that we've always reached out to collaborate with as an organization. And also it is a discussion that I think also fits into an appetite that a number of NGOs, international NGOs are expressing. This is from informal conversations, and they're keen on figuring out how do we build sustainability in our approach? How do we build kind of more alliances at the community level, and to drive towards more of a systemic change, greater impact, and of course also a conversation that I've had with a number of social entrepreneurs from across Africa, Ashoka Fellows, who are also very keen on bringing their insights and their tools, what they do, what really makes them stand out, to influence the international NGOs. So this, of course, is a topic that is relevant by all means. So just to kick off, Benjamin, I will start with you. For just your experience, what you've been doing all through, why would you say this is a relevant topic, especially at this particular point in time?
Thanks, Vincent. As I sit in London, UK, in headquarters of the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, I'm going to start also with global challenges. I argue that right now humanity faces extinction-level threats. Our economies and lives are so interdependent that while we have seen in the past societies collapse, right now this is a global threat. And I argue that all countries are developing countries, and that suggests a first paradigm shift. Sure, the Sustainable Development Goals are universal, applicable in all countries, low, middle, and high-income countries, but we still have de facto, of course, power dynamics. We have funding capacities in high-income countries that go through donor agencies, that go through NGOs. So I don't want to negate existing power dynamics, but argue we are all developing countries. First paradigm shift, and that makes this conversation important. The second one is we're seeing a set of emerging challenges, some of them induced by technology. We see right now impacts of certain business models in the IT sector through the tech giants that threaten not only data privacy and security, but also have impact on social cohesion and polarization. I argue in 10 years, we might see similar dynamics in the field of genomics and DNA data and privacy issue. And usually traditional organizations, NGOs, governments are not ideally set up, at least not yet, to deal with those challenges. So there is necessity to work much closer with entrepreneurs who can work in a much better anticipatory way. So that's the second reason why. And I would argue from where I sit and stand, and having worked in the aid system in multilateral and bilateral organizations, those organizations were set up to deal predominantly with complicated problems. But in my opinion, most problems today, also because they're so interdependent, are complex. And we are not very well set up to deal with complex problems, to work across thematic areas and to deal with uncertainty and ambiguity. So it's another main reason why a new set of actors and collaborations is necessary. And then lastly, it's important because the aid system is better set up to work on the central level, think about macro directionality of inclusive growth. To a degree, we work with local governments, sure, but what we are not well set up, fourth reason, is to think about needed macro directionality. How can we overcome poverty and really chip in on the leaving no one behind promise of the SDGs, but really invest in grassroots and bottom-up initiatives, and at the same time in coalition and movement building to kind of get to also a larger directionality, to not romanticize only the bottom-up, but really think about where do we need to go collectively as humanity and within our countries and societies from the local to the federal level. And that's still a challenge that's work in progress.
Thank you, Benjamin. So Megan, as you answer, as you get to introduce yourself a little bit, Benjamin has alluded to the issue of power dynamics. I don't know, obviously from a also gender lens, I don't know if this plays out in a way that it's double jeopardy, but also from you as a social entrepreneur, what would be your take in this in terms of this being relevant, and maybe just say something about the power dynamics and how does this look like, from a gender lens. And then Papa's joined. I will also give Papa an opportunity to just introduce himself. Megan.
Yeah, thanks, Vincent, and hi, everyone. Well, there's power over and power to. And so I think a lot of NGOs, international NGOs especially, have a lot of power over that allows a power to. And I think some of those dynamics are challenging in that, as a social entrepreneur, if you want to engage with international NGOs, often the country offices don't necessarily have the power to make long-term decision-making because it's bound on funding that comes from the international, largely global North space. So I think how funding is deployed is a key barrier to long-term partnerships, especially. We've had great partnerships that have been with international NGOs, but once that funding is done after 2 years, poof, even if you've found the Philosopher's Stone, it doesn't matter because they're now off to the next funded project. So I think the power is rooted in money, and gender dynamics are always there, but I think the global community is in the kind of narrative arc of Me Too and Black Lives Matter and things like that, really starting to think about systemic issues and moving from even thinking about gender equity and gender equality to even gender justice. And I think as we continue on that arc, it does offer great opportunities to have a more truly gender inclusive world. And I think social entrepreneurs are probably at the forefront of understanding how those dynamics work and how women and girls are systemically disempowered, and therefore can offer particular solutions that international NGOs need, but don't know how to do. And I'll pause there.
Thank you, Megan. David, I just want to rope you in now. What is the big, thing you're seeing, and sort of the excitement for you about this particular shift, this direction that we want to take, collaboration between international NGOs and other traditional partners with social entrepreneurs?
Yeah, thank you very much, Vincent, and thank you everybody on the panel for having me here. I'm super excited and really looking forward to our discussions here. Vincent, thanks a lot. And the one thing that really excites me most about the collaboration that we are trying to establish together here between social entrepreneurs, in particular, the big community in Ashoka, 4,000 entrepreneurial solutions to social challenges or opportunities, and then big non-governmental development organizations like ours, SOS Children's Village is one of the biggest child-focused organizations in the whole world. Well, the big tension and challenge that we can actually use as energetic element, well, we have solutions for what we have been working on for the last 50 years, 70 years sometimes. Yeah, we have one solution which we have replicated all over the world and grown strong organizations which can really carry solutions. But big organizations which have 40,000 boots on the ground, their, let's say, disadvantage is innovation, is flexibility. We don't always, we are unable with our big organizations to actually support this enough, because we are of course heavy on controls. We want to make sure that we make no mistakes. And then the key to quick innovation for me is to talk with those people who have new solutions, small proven solutions. And I'm always comparing ourselves with big tankers who can carry a lot of capacity. And I'm comparing social entrepreneurs when they have the Ashoka stamp, particularly the quality stamp. For me, they are the smaller zodiacs who are super flexible, fast. They cannot carry a lot of capacity, but they can make a proof of concept. And if we mix, we can actually bring tailored solutions to one of our 500 locations, to one of our 2,750 programs that we actually run all around the world in 160, or depends which organization, we are in 137 countries. So for sure, we cannot take a solution, just plug it on any community. but we have many communities on offer and 4,000 entrepreneurs on offer, and there must be the right match. And this is what excites me so much, looking for that match.
Perfect. Yeah, really well put. And I know, Pap, you've already joined. Thank you so much for joining. Most of the time, I mean, probably some of it is factual, some of it probably is just, perception. That, in this kind of conversation, the voice of Africa is never heard or never well represented, in terms of just bringing in perspective, more nuanced perspective of what is actually happening on the continent. And so I want to give you this opportunity, like I mentioned earlier to our audience. Pap is the executive director at Ashoka Africa. I want to give you this opportunity, Pap, to kind of just give us from your perspective, why is this topic, why is this conversation relevant, and how is this important to Ashoka's strategy in Africa?
Thank you, Vincent, and thank you everybody else who is on the panel with me. I think, like you said, this conversation is really timely because currently, as we know, the international development ecosystem or field is really nuanced, given also a time of challenges, time of pandemic, where resource allocation becomes also another critical part for a lot of organizations. I think if we get into maybe the African perspective, and I will even make it bigger, I would say from a global South perspective, I think there is a narrative of helplessness that's really coming from many of the countries from the global South, where local people, local communities, social entrepreneurs, change makers in local communities might be perceived by big international organizations are poor, are less developed, are helpless. So I think that's the narrative that we really need to shift. We need to shift away from a narrative of helplessness. And this is because of many reasons. I think one of those things is that to be able to understand that we can rebuild in homegrown capability, in homegrown innovation. The other thing that we can definitely look at also is the system change, that solutions are not necessarily always attached to resources, even though it's important, resources are really important. Also leveraging the diversity of different culture, different group, different continent, looking at as well the relationship, because in many African cultures, and I'll say even in all African cultures, trust is really the key in whatever you're building, and grassroots innovation also is really key in what we're building. So in this case, if you look at even the data, you will know that recently there are so many publications that really share that 74% of funding that's really going to Africa are really led by international, or going to international NGOs being based in Africa. So I think a colleague was just mentioning that earlier, that resources is really important, but I will also say that where do we direct the resources is important. So the working with tradition, working with culture, working with intergenerational respect, and healing gender inequality is also things that are really valuable. So value must be also part of value, and tradition and culture, I would say, must be part of this redefining the international development. Seeing local communities as really contributing factor to the solution, not only people who are helplessness, not only people who don't know how to solve the problem. I think just maybe for a first intervention, just to stop here, I will just summarize it by saying that, healing gender inequality is really important. It's one of the biggest, and COVID really has revealed that a lot of women pretty much are leaving work, staying at home because they have to take care of their kids, they have to take care of their relatives, they have to take care of all those, not necessarily men, but mostly women. And culture, as I said, and also building local capacity also is really important, but also knowing where we directed funding, because if we want maybe the funding to go a long way, we also have to look into social innovators, locally homegrown entrepreneurs to be able to work that. So redefining it really is timely, but also it requires a lot of different perspective and a lot of different thinking.
Thank you, Pab. And so you've touched on a few points there that swings me back to Megan. So Megan, as a social entrepreneur, I mean, there is also the argument from the other side that, okay, all this is true. I mean, we want to get into this kind of partnership, this collaboration, in a way that gives power back to the community and takes into consideration all the nuances that Pap is mentioning. But there is always this fear, apprehension that social entrepreneurs are not cut out for this kind of partnership. Like, no proper structures, it's a totally different culture. The systems probably are questionable. All these things. You have had successful collaborations with NGOs. I know you give examples if you want to, but just from that experience, maybe can you just shine a light on what was this an issue that you social entrepreneurs and say, like, for you as social enterprise, was it an issue that your structure, maybe your culture, is not in sync with the international NGO or other development partners? Is this true, and how do you overcome that?
Those are great questions. I mean, I think I'm obviously a white American, as you can see in here, but I've been living in Kenya for 20 years, and I do think that there are language barriers. I don't mean literal language, but how we communicate about things, because I think we probably have 80 or 90% of all the same values, and even as social entrepreneurs, I mean, we can actually have a lot greater accountability in our own organizations, because if things are a mess, we can fix them really quickly. Whereas if things are a mess in 137 countries, how do you even identify what's going wrong, much less fix it? So I think that there might be some misperceptions based on lack of understanding. And I think it might be similar to, you know, if you're in Senegal and trying to understand somebody in Austria, you know, how do we actually speak the same language and understand that we're speaking the same language? I think you have the same cultural barriers between INGOs and social entrepreneurs in terms of needing to find folks, and I think that is Ashoka, to be that bridge and recognize the shared values, the shared assets. And I think David put it very well in what he said, to be able to draw on the best strengths of either, right? I mean, as somebody who's been running Zana Africa, I founded it in 2007. I mean, the deep understanding we have of girls and boys and their needs and the opportunities, not just in Kenya, but even for African solutions for the global North, are tremendous. And I do think that if we can find those win-win solutions, and I think that social entrepreneurs are very good at finding those win-win opportunities with partners, I think it can be tremendously impactful. I'll give you two quick examples. One was with Plan International. We did a 2-year randomized control trial, and they led the implementation of our reproductive health and adolescent life skills curriculum that we developed. And that gave tremendous credibility to us. And for them, it was directly in line with their gender programming and trying to understand how to deliver adolescent reproductive health better, more efficiently. And together we discovered that just in 18 months, our curriculum changes all 3 gender norms, as well as family planning. But then the barrier there is now the 2-year funding is over. So now how do we find the right person within Plan to take that to a multi-country scale? So we're actually talking to people in Save the Children who want to leverage that knowledge to now do a multi-country expansion. So I don't think that we can always expect the same organizations to grow together all the time. I think you have to find the right partners that have the right needs at the right time. Similarly, World Vision, they were looking for some adolescent reproductive health programming in Western Kenya. We got much less money than we initially discussed. And I think that that's a real barrier for social enterprises, because these international NGOs have such large budgets for their international staff and other amount and other, programming issues that we really truncated a lot of what we were able to initially apply for. But they worked with the Teacher Service Commission in Kenya. And now, because of that partnership in 40 schools, the Teacher Service Commission is so committed to our program that we're now scaling up with them with 50 teachers and starting with 250 teachers next year. And they're demanding the Kenyan government to put this into the new life skills curriculum. So that's the type of systemic change that Ashoka wants to see. And we couldn't do that alone. We needed the reputation of World Vision, and they needed to see this curriculum grow, but they didn't want to themselves put it into government. But they wanted to see the systemic change so that they don't have to have that same programming for 50 years. So I think it's about carving out those win-wins, and it takes a lot of relational time and a lot of networking in conferences like this to start conversations and then keep them going and keep them going. And then one day something does happen. I don't know if that fully answers your question.
Yeah, Megan. I mean, it does. It does. I think that's a very good example, really, in terms of how that was conceptualized. And I like the point that you're making there. And I don't know how applicable for others this has been, where you start with one NGO, then you have to continue part of that work with another NGO. But this is good. This is quite a success story to see that it all led to systemic change. I want to draw in Felicity. So I had introduced Felicity in absentia. Felicity is an Ashoka Fellow from Rwanda, the founder and CEO of Association of Kigali Women in Sports, and also a member of International Olympics Committee, and also, is a key speaker and a resource person on issues conflict resolution. So Felicity, just for you to bring your voice into this conversation, you have had quite a number of partnerships, collaborations with NGOs, international NGOs. What would you say to be the value that you as a social entrepreneur brought to that kind of collaboration? What are some of the specific wins that you got, and what did these NGOs celebrate about their collaboration with you?
Thank you, Vincent. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm sorry I was late because of the time difference. I thought I was supposed to come in at 1 according to the time difference. So I'm sorry I could not make it on time. Yeah, thank you, Vincent, for the good introduction. Yeah, in order to reach where we are now, it's because we're working with different NGOs. The NGOs that were supporting our activities were very few because it was still a taboo to speak of women and sports. So it was something that was unusual. People just took time to understand the power of sports for conflict resolution, the power of sports for women self-confidence, and also their rights, because they believed women are not supposed to do any sports as in the culture. So by working with international NGOs, they were really quick to understand the cause and the passion, and they supported us in different activities, in capacity building, in organizing sports tournament, joining women conferences, especially using sports for social change. So we learned a lot from them, and their support, and they're always following us on a daily basis to make sure that we reach our target and we reach our mission. So working with different NGOs is really something that is useful and we must continue, because with each other, there is a lot to gain. But if you remain just alone, you cannot go far. So it was very useful that we reached almost our vision, and this has given us a credit of moving on and changing the mindset of our people, and especially women in sports. The mindset has been changed. Women are not participating in sports. We have high qualified women coaches, international referees, and something that was exciting most is that a Rwandan lady was able to officiate the World Cup in France, Women World Cup. So this was the insight we got from them, encouraging us, learning from them, and telling us things will happen, but it is a process. Reminding us that whenever there is a change, there's always resistance. So they helped by helping us to understand and to be patient, and then determined not to give up. So I think that's we shall keep talking about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Felicity. Still staying with you, I would like for you to help us, disabuse this notion that when you are collaborating with an international NGO, headquartered in the West, usually you are more of, if you are a social entrepreneur in Africa, the relationship, there's a bit of power imbalance such that you are more of a delivery unit rather than being an active player in innovating that solution. Is this? Can you speak to that?
First of all, international organizations, they normally believe that with Africa, we are still behind the development. So when they could realize that someone can be innovative, you become like I started just by being passionate of women's rights and sports. Then at the end of it all, you realize that you need to be an entrepreneur, start business, because we believe that the idea cannot move on without having some finance support. And I first decided to make my own business so that I may support our sports activities. Then in the long run, when you go to meet this international organization, you have something to show that you had a new idea, and this new idea have also dealt with system change. If they were not, supporting women to play sports, but by our sensitization, you find that they now, in the Ministry of Education, they allow girls to participate in sports. So there's system change. So as we meet them, and then we talk of our innovation, how far we are, where we started, and how much we have achieved, then you find that they are really ready to come and work with us on a daily basis. As they come look for you, they want to discuss more with you because just of the innovation that you managed to put forward.
Thank you so much. And so I asked that question because someone had sent it to me when they saw that this session will be happening and I'll be moderating, and the first thing their reaction was, but how many times do they in particular try connecting with international partners to collaborate, and the feeling is usually like they're coming with this impression that you don't have what you need to have in place, or maybe this is not going to work, so they want to prescribe for you. But it's good that you're saying, I mean, from your answer, it sounds, and Benjamin, I want you to kind of weigh in here as well. If you have a proof of concept, I mean, there is no way someone is going to tell you like, okay, so this is, they're not going to untwist you to change that, right? So it's more of proof of concept. You have something going on, and there is you can structure win-win. They see what value this is going to bring to them and what value they're bringing. So Benjamin, I just want to bring you into that, to that perspective. Is this in the quest for us to build this international alliance, establishing meaningful collaboration between social entrepreneurs and international NGOs? Do you see this as something that will get you out of your temporary retirement as an activist to champion more of these kind of collaborations? And how do we go about addressing either perceptions of power imbalance in this kind of collaboration or real power imbalance? How do we go about that? I know it's kind of like too many questions in one, but go for it.
Thanks, Vincent. I'm not going to respond to your first question because it's not about me. I really am here in a listening mode, and sure, I have a role to play in the organization that I work for currently, but it's really try to advance meaningful change. And when I said earlier that I think most of the challenges we work on are complex, that suggests we should change to a degree not only how we work, but how we think. And for me, one step to embrace systems thinking is to start analyzing a problem also with the question, how are we part of the problem? Now, listening to the other speakers, and particularly Felicity before, I think for government agencies and international NGOs, asking this question in the context of what we're discussing today can lead to really a bunch of course answers. But let me suggest two. One is, I think we borrow a lot of how we understand and frame innovation from Silicon Valley. And while I think there's useful stuff to borrow and adapt, I think many of the notions and larger paradigms are actually not useful for development innovation. And I think that translates in how we look at partners in the global south. I argue that racism and neocolonialism is still prevalent in how people think and act in development organizations. And that translates into attitudes like Felicite said. So I think that mixture of history of the aid system and how we borrow from Silicon Valley makes a lot of us in relevant agencies and funding situations and positions not able to see the innovation capabilities of partner on the grassroots level throughout the globe. So I think that's the first thing where we have to ask, how do we see innovation and what is useful to take from the dominant paradigms, including from Silicon Valley, and what is not? And the second one is, we are particularly bad in investing in ventures and putting trust in diverse teams of people who push change. We want to invest in solutions. This has been discussed before, but I think also that needs to be a certain paradigm shift. And I actually ask myself if we shouldn't decommission that term solution. Having grown up in Germany and having lived in the US and the UK, I haven't come across my governments here saying, I have a solution for you. They offer you a service, and it's clear that that service is always, to be refined and improved, or product. And us speaking our solution, it's just this old mindset of us thinking there is a certain end state to a problem, which there usually isn't. You always have to continue on improving situations. So those are just two small points on that. And you ask about the power imbalances. I'm a big friend to making power imbalances also explicit. I want to get to even playing field as much as possible. But that can't happen by just negating that there are power imbalances. As long as there are funding dynamics, for example, in economic inequalities that make it happen, that the UK, for example, has a multi-billion budget as aid budget, that's a power imbalance. And we just have to navigate it and not negate it. And maybe one last point, which I think is important. When I think about, the future of aid and how can social entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurs have a role in that, I see so much potential in many of the speakers outlined before. But I also always go back to a quote from Ori Okola. She works for the Media Network in Kenya. And she said, there's no innovating out of bad leadership. So in other words, again, I grew up in Germany. We wouldn't look at social entrepreneurs to improve how German schools work. We would always look at the state and say that's a core responsibility of the state. So while I think we need to massively invest in innovation ecosystems that let the work of social entrepreneurs thrive and really think about education and infrastructure, thinking about how can we feed things into the education curricula like Megan outlined, we have to also think of core responsibilities of the state and not dilute that and put it in the responsibility of international NGOs or social entrepreneurs right away, because that's also shifting negatively power dynamics and perceptions, in my view. I'll stop here.
Thank you. Thank you, Benjamin. Yeah, I mean, I know you say this is not about you, and that's for sure. But I like the insight that you're bringing, just kind of the energy also from looking at it from an activism sort of push, yeah, and that is what I was making reference to. But David, now to you, so we're discussing all this, and it almost sounds like we are seeing the gaps and the barriers and all this from the other side. I don't know, from social entrepreneurs, from your experience also, if you look at social entrepreneurs, where is the responsibility of social entrepreneurs, and especially if you're talking about social entrepreneurs who are doing their work in Africa, where do you lay responsibility? For people like Megan and Felicity, in terms of making this kind of collaboration work, in terms of bringing down the barriers that we are talking about. David.
Thank you, Vincent, and thank you everybody for your interventions. I I took a lot of notes, which are going to keep me busy after our meeting for sure. I would briefly really like to answer Vincent's question here. One of the key words or notions that I understood in our interventions here was about power, about control, and about competent or complete actors. And that is definitely true. Large organizations like ours, we have specialized to cooperate with agencies like where Benjamin works. We are really specialized. This is an industry. We have the same language. We use the same techniques. We have thousands of experts. We believe our experts and expertise is what is needed out there. And we have the tradition to go out there with this expertise and spread it around as if it was the best thing, what the whole world has been waiting for. And I mean, I believe in our experience, that's for sure. But what I have really seen, what makes a big change, and where social entrepreneurs like Felicite, Megan, and so many others around us make the big difference, is when we let go of the control we're so specialized in, when we hand over the power to the citizen, and then we change from expert-led interventions, which are answering precisely to call for proposals, when we change over to citizen-led, when we have to challenge Benjamin and his colleagues, we have to say, listen, guys, this call for proposal, fantastic, but you know what? The answer is not going to answer your call 100%. This is a no-go for my industry. I can never do that. But I love to do it because I take people, I broker colleagues like Felicite in. Their proven solution is maybe something which in the call for proposal never has been spoken about. So let us speak about these opportunities that only last for 2 years, 4 years, and how can we establish a lasting collaboration. And this is really a process. This is not a solution. That's absolutely true. And I mean, when Felicite was saying that women in sports start to be seen as complete actors, as nothing is missing here, as powerful as anyone else, this speaks a lot to me. And when I met small social entrepreneurs, we call small because we think in terms of money, budgets, people, but the mindset was the greatest what I have seen. And this is about 10 years ago in Kenya. I met George and he told me, David, don't talk to me about your Muzungu paper project. What I need are turbines. I want to buy the turbines. Help me get access to buying and purchasing the turbine. I don't need a present. I just need access to your finance, structured finance or whatever we all know. And this is all I can do. I can broker this kind of expertise, experiences with the real need that citizens are articulating, the opportunities that citizens can realize. And that makes a beautiful project and actually a beautiful reality where lives can be transformed. That's what I love so much about our conversations and work together. Is it somehow useful for you, Vincent, what I said now?
Yeah, yes, that is useful. And then also, I just want to give like 1 minute or 2 minutes for any of the panelists if there is something you want to react to, maybe from what David has said, Benjamin or Felicity or Megan or even Pap. Do you have something you kind of want to follow up with?
Yeah,
but yes, Pap. Yeah. Yes, Pap.
Yeah, I think I can just jump in here to add a little bit because I think I really like where the conversation is going, especially the power dynamic. Because for me, I think understanding the ecosystem of where the funding flow is really important because we talked about the role of the entrepreneurs, we talked about the role of the NGOs, we talked about the role of the government. But I think we're talking about also the role of the funder is really important here. And understanding and learning to lead from the needs on the ground is, I think that's really what creates the more powerful way of redefining this international development. Because we have this network of what we call the system change network of African leaders, where we're having conversations with funders to really redefine what should we fund and what should we fund as a priority. And you can see that they're becoming more and more, as Benjamin said, more interested in funding system change and building funding ecosystem as opposed to one single solutions. However, there is also a big reluctance from big funders to fund long-term system change solution because to fund an ecosystem and system change, it requires a long time as opposed to funding one solution. So I think what I'm saying here is also, how do you grow the appetite for experimentation, for emerging process and long-term approach? Especially process, because process really brings people to work together, brings people to experiment, brings people to build trust among each other, but also it really helps them redesign the funding model that's really big, that we currently have, as Benjamin was saying. Because collaboration for collective impact is what we need right now. There is single solution that really important, as I said, like from the entrepreneurs working by themselves, but bringing the social entrepreneurs, from a community level, who identify and understands the local problems. You bring the funder who has the fund, but ready to commit or willing to commit for a long term. You bring governments who are ready to understand and learn from those, the knowledge gap that was generated from a local culture would really help. The know-it-all mentality, I think also creates a big challenge, because we might want to ask ourselves, how many of those local innovation, from grassroots innovation, from Rwanda, where Felicity is, from Kenya, where Megan is, will make it to Harvard Review Business, will make it to Stanford Review Business. There is what we call the expert opinion, but also there is what we call the community opinion. And both opinions are really important. Otherwise, if the expert opinion, like just mentioning the word "ed" for me, implies a power imbalance in the relationship, because one is giving another, and it's already defeat the whole purpose of how do we collaborate for collective impact. So system change for me, and also investing in ecosystem, and ecosystem means different actors that you bring together, that includes all different levels of intervention, from the social innovation at the local level, from the successful model that can be replicated, from the system change that can change policies, from the framework mentality, that really change mindset. That's really, I think, where we need to redefine everything, right? Building trust, creating collaboration, and also really redefining how the funding should follow. So I just wanted to share that with you guys. Thanks.
If I could add.
Yeah, yes, Megan. Yeah.
I think Ashoka has a really good framework of needs and offers. That's what we did. I think you were there, Vincent, when I was inducted into Ashoka in 2014. We all got together and wrote, on big pieces of paper on the wall, what our needs are and what our offers are. And that might help be a tool to shift the power dynamic away from one has and the other doesn't. But all of us have needs and all of us have offers. Maybe the big NGOs can help with system strengthening or scaling internally, or scaling programs. But the social entrepreneurs can also offer tremendous amounts to those organizations. So I think the framework of language we use, I think Ashoka has a lot to offer there. And then second, I think we really need to find brokers to bridge this knowledge gap. And I really want to put Ashoka kind of on tap for that. And Vincent, I'll follow up with you after this on this. But what can Ashoka do to catalyze the people that are already in its ecosystem to talk to each other more, such as conferences like this, but beyond that, and how to understand who needs what, right? Like as a social entrepreneur, I don't know what SOS is doing in, West Africa or North America. I don't know what's happening in Rwanda that we could maybe leverage and put into our programming. So there's this gap of, I don't know what the needs and offers are. And so who can help facilitate that so that we can talk with governments, with big international NGOs, with other stakeholders beyond the scope of this conversation to really affect the systems change that we all agree is so necessary to make. And I think it could be Ashoka could potentially step into that even more than it's doing in that ecosystem.
Thank you, Megan. So we have only, this has really been, very insightful conversation. I mean, 1 hour is really short for this kind of conversation. And so for me, and I think for all of us here, we would really want to know what are the key action points? How do we drive this conversation forward? I also know there are a number of questions that have been asked. The participants have shared some questions, but I just want to give us sort of an opportunity, and maybe also David, I just know you have something that you can talk about in terms of the collaboration that we are working on. What do you see as the next step? How do we drive this conversation forward? I want to start with you, Felicity. What would you say would be the key action points going forward to get to more concrete, to concretize what we are, discussing here? Because there is, from what we've shared, is quite immense opportunities to get into, to move this to a very definite action step. So for you, Felicity, what do you see as a key action point? Then I think I'll come back to you, Megan, then David, then Benjamin. As we wrap up, if we can do it in 1 minute each, then we'll be done. Felicity, you are muted. You're muted.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, what I can just say is that this is an interesting, an interesting conversation that would need to move forward. I think what I should take in is that since Mr. David talked about handover to citizen lead and funding is very important. So if one has a passion and an idea, and you see that it can change people's mindset for social change, but then they have a weakness of writing very good proposals that can attract big donors. That's already a weakness. So you'll not reach far where you would like to reach because writing is not so good, but yet the changes, the mindset change, the system changes there, but because it's not well written, you find that people are not ready to fund so that you may move on. So I think that's something that we should think of, so that at least when they're going to fund, they look down to see where will be the impact, what will be the theory of change, rather than just looking into papers because people have given application, they see this one is well written, so we should think about that. Because this is just something that someone has a passion and then writing is weak, then you don't get any support, and this also delays the development of the country. So I think with the international organization should give a priority to grassroots innovations so that it may be a long-lasting solution for development. Thank you.
Thank you. So more I mean, that's, connects to what Megan was saying earlier in terms of language. I mean, it could be literally the language. It could be also just sort of like an elitist, an exclusive sort of a club where, if you know the language, if you know how to do it, if you know how to put it down, then your chances of success are high. Megan, what do you think is the action step? What should we do to advance, to make real this kind of collaborations from a social entrepreneur perspective?
Well, I think there's a lot that international NGOs can do, right, in terms of evaluating their own focus on patriarchy, racism, all those things, like really working on that. But as a social entrepreneur, I think we are change agents. And I see a lot of my own work as ecosystem building and talking to the funders, talking to these big organizations for systems change. As a white American who's lived in Kenya for 20 years, I feel like that's my role of my voice, is amplifying the amazing solutions that are happening here and translating that to see how we can create unexpected partnerships. It is a lot because social entrepreneurs are overstretched, underfunded, et cetera, and not all of them can do that. But I think for those that have those networks, being able to really double down on supporting those who are kind of entrepreneurs within big international NGOs, as well as big companies, I think really helps create that systems change. So just encouraging social entrepreneurs that partly that is our work. It's not just to create the social impact change on the ground, but to be that bridge. Yeah, and then to just continue to frame, I think, this needs and offers so that we find these win-win partnerships, because I think there is a lot that international NGOs would like to do if they had the bandwidth to do it. And I think just as kind of a parting shot on what international NGOs could do are there performance metrics for staff to identify potential partners that could help scale, right? Like what is in the DNA of international NGOs to be able to try to solicit these partnerships and identify them and to reward people that are doing that? I think if the systems are structured to unleash that, you would be surprised how the same people who aren't doing any innovation would suddenly be bringing new ideas. And a lot of that is how the culture is structured.
Thank you, Megan. I like that. The role of social entrepreneurs in building bridges, kind of just not thinking narrowly, but also widely through the ecosystem. Benjamin, from the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development, it used to be easier in the other name. What are you seeing as the opportunities? Any concrete opportunities that we could probably be put an eye out there for?
Yeah, thanks. I noted down some thoughts for FCDO, but also social entrepreneurs and INGOs. Just a quick practical reply to Megan. I'm not going to name the company because they haven't published about it, but it's one of the giants out of Silicon Valley in terms of putting incentives forward. What they did each year, they asked their staff members to propose people who can put feedback forward for a 360 review. And the more people they put forward outside of their core team, so across the company, the higher the financial incentive gets. Now, I'm not arguing we should get financial incentives, but the idea behind it that, for example, an INGO can ask their staff members to think about, each year who can provide feedback on your performance outside of the organizational boundaries from social entrepreneur ecosystems could be one of many ways to really practically incentivize what you just outlined, Megan, just to get some inspiration from the private sector. All right, quickly, government agencies, what can we do differently? One concrete step is I will follow up with all the panelists, but especially with the network for systems change in Africa, because we are part of what's called the International Development Innovation Alliance, and we are committed to doing a better job in diversifying how big donor agencies do innovation. Support for specific initiatives as we do now, but also working on a portfolio level with a real diversified portfolio, investing in systems innovation also on the intangible side, coalition and movement building. And we want to get critical feedback from you on our endeavors, but it's very much focused on how can we unlock longer term funding that is not focused on tangible outcomes, but on efforts to build ecosystems and on systems change. I want to hold us all to account to be precise when we talk about systems change. What systems are we referring to and what kind of change? Not every change is a positive one. So I kind of also want us to get better at not using innovation or systems change in a way that is just almost empty of meaning at times. But that's one way for government agencies. It's work in progress, but I want to invite you as friends for critical feedback. For social entrepreneurs, I think what could make more sense, Megan, you said you're doing this. I would argue it can be done even more to situate your solution under larger change initiatives. So if you advance sport for women and girls in Rwanda, to then have a good argument, how this contributes to larger efforts for gender equality in Rwanda on different levels, because that makes it more attractive for funders usually, at least on the bilateral level, to support distinct initiatives. And for INGOs, in addition to everything that has been said, innovation is a lot about learning, right? And we're not doing a great job with that, I argue. None of us, but probably we the least, and the more grassroots, the better. But for INGOs to manage upwards and downwards and make learning a dedicated outcome, push the donors to accept that in the planning instruments, but hold also social entrepreneurs to better account for learning, for documenting it, for sharing it. It's not about a binary success or failure. It's really about advancing social change, and that comes with waves and setbacks, as we all know. But we have to learn together, and we can all do a better job on that.
Thank you, Benjamin. Thank you, Benjamin. David, also, maybe you use the last final 1 minute. I hope we still have 2 or so to conclude. But David, you want to talk about the collaboration and any other opportunities other than the one that we're already working on?
Yeah, of course. I will also talk to the other panelists for sure. And I'm very happy about any contact that we can make, and then we can just jumpstart into action. And then what I want to do from today on, and what I have done yesterday also, and I will do it tomorrow, I will collect ever more failures, because an experiment is not a good one if it doesn't fail. But of course, I want to see success too. So I have a long list of failures, not worked experiments. And on the other hand, I have a small list, really small, of outstanding experiments that I have been able, together with my colleagues from outside the company and inside the company, to push into this organization. And I want to continue to do this with all my colleagues who work in other organizations. And this is a sexy thing about social entrepreneurship and social intrapreneurship. Work as hard as you can, just don't get fired. You have to challenge the system. We have to do it every day.
Thank you. Great. Great, David. And I'm really, my apologies, we had a number of questions from the panelists. So what we will do, because we're running out of time, the questions will be channeled to the panelists that the questions are addressed to, and then we can, I think it will also form a good opportunity to kind of just network with the, the rest of the participants, especially those who have asked these questions, and maybe find out if there are opportunities there to collaborate. Pap, what last word?
Yeah, I think thanks to everybody. We'll do the same thing. I would love to also bring you into this African System Change Leaders Network. All of you, Vincent is already part of the facilitator. So we work. These are managing directors, CEOs, entrepreneurs of different organizations, and we'll also share a recent survey that we done, really trying to analyze the power dynamic between the West and the global South, and especially in Africa. Here, you will see some of those things, and it resonates very well. But I think one last word that I would say is, I think a good beginning is to agree to work on a process toward a collective impact, as opposed to agreeing on an outcome that will define the process. Because every organization has a individual interest. They have an interest, they have a mandate, they have a mission from the board, they have also a mission or a mandate from their funders, which really makes it really challenging for them not to think outcome. But once you think outcome, it drives and it narrows, the window of learning, the window of sharing, the window of collaboration, because you're focusing 100% on an outcome. But if you work on a process and say the process is, how do we define a collective process that's accepted by all, contributed by all, to bringing value, culture, interest for us to learn to improve each other equally, to get to a way that the outcome will be defined by the collective group. So I think that will be really the beginning. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, David. Thank you, Benjamin. Thank you, Felicity. Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Pap. It is an honor to facilitate this conversation. I have learned so much from you, each and every one of you, that I would not have learned if I had to spend this 1 hour trying to read all these things that you guys have from your experience and from your knowledge. It's really been wonderful. And for the rest of the participants of the Ashoka Changemaker Summit, I want to wish you all the best. Continue enjoying the summit. This is indeed one of a kind of a summit. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, everybody. See you soon. Talk soon. Fantastic.
Thanks, Vincent. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.